Hello, my name is Bill Thomas. I write books for young people like you, and I've just finished one called Hum. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the book this morning. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that you are 11 years old and your parents died when you were very young. Since then, you've lived with your grandmother, and she is the person you love and trust more than anyone else on earth. And suddenly, you learn that everything your grandmother told you about your parents and your earliest life was a lie. How would you feel? What would you do? And how did you find out that what your grandmother told you wasn't true? Someone told you, but it wasn't a person. It was an animal. It was a llama. Now, how would you feel? Now, what would you do? This is the situation that faces Alan Davis, the main character in my story, Hum. This one. Where did I get the idea to write this? Well, the answer is a little strange. It came from two sources. One was a high school biology class. The other was my grandson. Some years ago, I worked in a local high school with a young man who needed a lot of help. He was in 10th grade and he was taking biology. And every Friday, each student in the class had to get up in front of everybody else and do a short presentation, only about 1 minute, on some topic related to biology. Now, you may think that's hard to do, but biology is a huge subject. It covers all living things, plants, animals, people, germs. This young man was fascinated by llamas, and every single week he came up with something new about llamas to present to the class. And the one thing that I found incredible was that llamas talk to each other. They hum. They also squeak and grunt and squeal, but when they hum, it's the equivalent of words. They are talking to each other by humming. Now, at about this same time, my grandson, who was a little over 2 years old, was learning how to speak. And he learned to speak English the same way you and I did. He heard words, and he saw what happened when those words were spoken, and eventually he understood what those words meant and then began to try to say those words himself. And I began thinking, what if a child was raised with llamas, around llamas all day long, and heard them humming and saw what happened when they made humming noises? Isn't it possible that that child could learn to speak and understand the llama language? And that is where the idea for this book came from. You might not think of hiking as research for a story, but it was. In the book, Alan has to take a long walk, 10 miles, through the mountains and forests of New York State in the middle of winter. I did that hike, all 10 miles of it. And I did it again in the winter on snowshoes. And I did part of it at night with a headlamp. And I took notes all the way along. And much of what I learned doing those hikes is in the story. And again, it's so that you, the reader, can understand, can feel what it was like for Alan when he was on that hike. Once I had the idea for the book, I had to start doing research to find out more about what I wanted to write about. First of all, I had to learn a lot more about llamas than I got from that high school biology class. And I read books and I read magazine articles. I went on the internet where you can find YouTube videos of llamas humming to each other. And I found out that there was a llama ranch about 100 miles from where I live, and I telephoned the owners and talked to them about llamas and the noises they make and how llamas act with each other and how llamas act with people. All information I needed. Once I had that information, I had to pick a place for the story to happen. And I've always loved the Adirondack Mountains of northern New York. So I decided that's where the story was going to be. And I picked a little town called Newcomb that I had driven through a few times and said, this is where Alan is going to live. But of course, Alan is 11 years old. He's got to go to school. So I emailed the principal of the Newcomb Central School, told him what I was doing, and asked if I could come for a visit. And he said yes. So I went to Newcomb. I spent 2 days in the school. I sat in classes with 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, even a couple high school classes. I talked with the kids. I talked with the teachers. I talked to the principal. I even talked to some of the cafeteria workers, all of which helped me write the book and make that school real for you, the reader. Once you have done your research and you're ready, you have to start writing at some point. And the very first line that I wrote for this book, and I had to go back and look it up, it was buried on my computer, but the very first line that I ever wrote for this book was, "The shotgun roared, the sound slammed against the snow-capped mountains, bounced among them, and rolled across the valley below." That's not the first line of the book anymore. It's still in there, but it's moved kind of way in the middle of the book. And speaking of moving things, when I do write, I use these things. Now, you know what these are. Those little yellow sticky notes. Very often, when I finish a chapter or a small section, I'll write just 3, 4, 5 words on one of these sticky notes, and I paste it on a whiteboard that's near my computer. Doing that lets me see the whole flow of the story as it is developing. And doing that means, like with that first line that used to be the first line of the book, I can move it. I can peel the sticky note off and say, that shouldn't be there. It should be over here. And then I can look at others and say, you know, that one shouldn't be there at all. Cross it off and the sticky note goes away. It's a very useful tool. One more thing I would like to have you do as a reader. I know that all of you, if not all of you, many of you have pets at home. Dogs, cats, birds, rabbits, chinchillas, maybe a pony, I don't know. But I'm certain that if you have a pet, you talk to it. When you come home from school and your dog comes running out to meet you, you talk to your dog. When you're sitting in a chair and your cat jumps up on the arm of the chair next to you, you talk to it. If your bird is singing in its cage, you might even try to whistle back, talking to the bird. Now, I want you to imagine this. When you do that, if you could bark or whine or growl like your dog, or if you could meow and hiss and purr like your cat, if you could chirp like a bird, and the dog or the cat or the bird or your pet would understand exactly what you are saying. And likewise, you could understand what your pet is saying to you. Would that be cool or what? And that is what happens with Alan and the llama in this book. Alan and the llama speak the same language. And I think that's cool. And I hope you will too.